this time, I'd like to introduce our regional administrator. That's going to be Ms. Tammy Trevino.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Fort Worth, the regional office for HUD. It's good to see all your faces. You're all excited. You're ready to dig into the guidelines and the requirements and get ready to serve all our people that are out there in the field. So we're happy to see you. I believe this is being webcast in other areas across the country. Am I correct? Great. So welcome to everybody across the country. And just want you to know that we're happy that you're here. We're happy that you're our partners. The President thanks you for all your work. The Secretary is so glad that you're our partner. And we look forward to working. We work only with the biggest and the best, or the smallest and the best. And we're happy to work with anybody who is willing to help us meet the mission of HUD. And so with that, good luck the rest of the meeting. Let us know if we can ever serve you in any way here at HUD. And have a good day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rennie. Okay, so now we have our keynote speaker, Mr. Craig Barnes from the Atlanta Physician Center.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Tammy. I'd like to start out by welcoming everyone to Fort Worth. A lot of folks had originally, we've been planning M&M 3.8 FSM Industry Day for a long time. It's been a long time coming. And I know a lot of you were anxious. We originally were going to host both services, actually, tandem, the AM and the FSM 3.7 and 3.8 from Atlanta. The decision was actually made by the Chief Procurement Officer. She said, hey, looking at the areas, the map, Texas, even though the areas are split, has the most inventory of the area being resolicited at this time, so it only made natural sense that we give Fort Worth the nod as far as hosting. So I want to thank Kathy Baker, our contracts director here in Fort Worth, and Tammy Trevino, the regional administrator of Fort Worth, for hosting this event. It's a huge opportunity for HUD, so I thank them. I also want to thank Jameen Bryan, the Chief Procurement Officer of HUD, and Maurice Jones, the Deputy Secretary of HUD, who actually is on his way out as well. Both adamantly wanted to attend this event, and unfortunately, part of those delays were we were going back and forth for a long time and just couldn't get the schedules to align. So I wanted to express their sincere condolences on not being able to attend. So that's how I actually got roped into the keynote. I also want to extend the thanks for all the preparation work that goes out to my contracting staff. Louis Bogan, actually, you'll find out, will be the lead procuring contracting officer on 3.8, so the FSM services. I'm trying to pass the reins as much as possible to empower them and give them the opportunity to take the lead as the contracting officer. I'll certainly be overseeing, the acquisitions from my role, both as the director over the office and the principal administrative contracting officer, who gets to oversee all the M&M work. I also want to thank both SBA and Ostabu, Mashoma Hayes, I know, and Mr. Herbert Austin, who we haven't formally met yet, but thank you for your attending the event as well. Specifically, small business is at the forefront of HUD's goals. It's from a working perspective. Everything we say and do is small business these days. We haven't established the FY14 goals yet as far as our small business goals. I know the negotiations have already ensued, but I don't know that we've gotten the formal dictum back from SBA on that. Our FY13 goal was 37%. We were able to narrowly squeak by that goal. But to put it in perspective, HUD did about $1.8 billion in total contract dollars in FY13. Of that, about $800 million was M&M related. And actually, if you look at it, because we were approaching ceilings, total obligations on our end were actually closer to about $1.2 billion. and we had about $400 million in DOPS, basically reshuffling the monies that were formerly obligated during either the base year option year 1 that were then put on the current option period option year 2 on the existing FSM and AM contracts. So when you figure it out, it actually comes out to be a little over 50% of or a little less than 50% of total obligations, and but looking at it, about half of that, or $400 million, goes to small business. So to put that in perspective, it's actually more than 60% of HUD's total small business goal came from the M&M contract award. So that really is a huge accomplishment, and I have to extend my thanks Ivory Himes for her part in assisting us with meeting that goal, because realistically, single-family asset management doesn't take time to structure the areas, to do the things necessary to allow us to meet that goal. HUD doesn't meet that goal. So realistically, Ivory Himes has a lot to do with that, and Charles Coulter, the DAS, as well. I'd also like to extend thanks to SBA at the headquarters level last year. It's actually been a long time coming, revisiting the NAICS and specifically Sector 53, which deals with real estate. We had candid dialogues, myself, Jameen, Keith Serber, the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer, with SBA at the headquarters level, and it had been something we had been pushing for. There are a few other agencies that do ordering under Sector 53, but no one does as much ordering as HUD does, at least historically. So it had been about 12 years, I think, since Sector 53 had been revisited. They came out this past year with the revised standards under Sector 53. So I'm happy to announce, we will be moving back to Sector 53, the real estate NAICS, going forward, both actually with 3.7 and 3.8. So, and that's thanks to SBA. The historical trend was what I wanted to focus, I guess, my conversation. I don't want to steal any of the thunder as far as the requirements go. Eric Cobb, our REO director, who's had a nice heavy hand as far as some of the restructuring that he'll go into as far as the 3.8, and Louis Bogan as far as the contracting. So what I wanted to go into was more with a small business slant, since this is an industry day specifically. Obviously, a lot of what we're going to be targeting going forward will be small business related. I wanted to focus on, basically where we've been, where we came from in making some of the decisions that have been made. Specifically, one of the biggest problems we've had historically, and my experience only goes back to 2007, so I'm not one who's been here since the onset of it. Both actually Ivory and Eric, I think, have been around longer than I have at HUD specifically, so they've seen it firsthand, the shift from the Ream contracts to M&M 1 and then M&M 2, and then the current iteration, at least, of 3.0 and then 3.5, 3.6 were the most recent. The FSM 3.6 and AM 3.5 actually being the first efforts that were awarded out of a field office rather than headquarters. Still trying to get out of the protest window as far as 3.5, get those contracts activated, but 3.6 has been active, and we look forward to moving forward with 3.5 in the very near future as well. What I can say is, what we've seen from a small business perspective, HUD has always done an excellent job in achieving our small business goals. In fact, our percentages have been significantly higher than almost any other federal agency, except maybe SBA. Which, kudos to SBA for walking the walk and actually, doing the most as far as small business. It only makes sense. I think take it with a lot of pride as far as being able to accomplish those small business goals, but to be able to accomplish them intelligently. Specifically looking at our small businesses, going forward with both M&M 1 and M&M 2, we had a lot of small businesses who were grown very quickly under NAICS at the times that really didn't correspond with the size of the areas, the $3 million set aside, or the NAICS, the small business size standard in the areas where contractors were doing upwards at the time. Early actually in M&M 2, we had, believe it or not, troubles meeting, that we're talking 2004, 2005 time frame, had trouble meeting not small business goals, but actually guaranteed minimums, we had a lot of small business set-asides, but because we weren't doing the volume of work that we had originally anticipated, we actually had difficulties meeting small business goals. Then by the end of M&M 2, the onslaught, the bottom fell out of the market. We had more inventory than what we knew to do with, and we faced a situation where we were actually exceeding ceilings and everything else. So we had grown a number of small businesses very, very quickly. Going forward, the emphasis in 3.0 obviously was we didn't want to restrict solely to small business, so there weren't as many set-aside areas, but we were highly encouraging it and did a heavy review on the subcontracting side as well. Wanted small businesses to play a crucial role in the actual end service at the properties, and actually a lot of you benefited. That's how you came in the door, you know, that a lot of you got involved on that end as subcontractors and were able to grow the areas and eventually spin off your own businesses or come to a state where you actually became prime contractors under our 3.0 and 3.5 or 3.6 contracts. Looking at it, that's the trend we would like to continue going forward. Specifically, now that the NAICS have been realigned, that the ceilings or the size standards are more in line with what we see as from an annual revenues perspective. Not to say small businesses shouldn't grow out of those size standards. Everybody's goal typically as a small business is eventually to grow to large, but you shouldn't be doing it in a single year under a contract. I mean, realistically, being thrown in the waters to have to compete, you know, against, I won't call them sharks, but the large businesses that realistically, it's a difficult transition to make. A lot of you were able to successfully make that transition from 3.0 into, you know, the 3.5, 3.6, putting together from a proposal standpoint. One of the things HUD is looking at, you know, specifically is, you know, how do we ensure a diverse and dynamic performance base? I realize, you know, one of the things that, you know, we'll probably get at least somewhat beat up over is the fact, yes, the 3.5, 3.6 contracts, although we separated the areas out, went single award, we ended up with a lot of the same contractors capturing multiple awards. You know, it is one of the conversations behind the scenes. We want to make sure, one, that you can perform in the areas, but two, to try and spread the wealth as far as, you know, vast as we can go, both with the areas and giving other businesses the opportunities to compete. By a show of hands, how many of the current attendees here in Fort Worth are small businesses and have not performed as a prime to HUD in the past? Pretty good group. I'd say probably, what, about a third maybe of the attendance for those in the field who can't see it. You know, you can probably, if you want to go ahead and do the same straw count, at least as far as the field offices who have video accessibility, you know, I'd be interested as well what the dynamic is in those offices. Hopefully it's somewhere similar. That said, our main emphasis in going forward is going to be to support small business, but to do it intelligently, and to the extent that we can, you know, help you with both prime and small business subcontracting opportunities. We want you to lean on us. We want you to get the experience. We want you to be able to grow your businesses such that you have the capability to compete on these, eventually become primes, and grow the next generation of business under the M&M portfolio. A lot of the names change, the faces stay the same. I realize a lot of you have been at it for a long time as well. How many of you are large businesses now in the room that started as small? Show of hands. Again, probably another third of the room. So realistically, you didn't get to where you're at overnight. You started with HUD probably way back in the day, even before I was here. And you've seen the same dynamic change over the years. You may have been in that cadre of contractors that were in a situation forced to compete as large as before you were ready. It was one of the prime reasons, at least under the 3.6, we went out under the janitorial custodial NAICS, because I said realistically we're not doing our small businesses any favors by trying to solicit, you know, this as a $3 million requirement, when clearly in 6 months or less, that regardless of the area, even the smallest areas, with current volumes being what they are, we're burning through more than $3 million that you know, those same businesses we would have had awarded to would have had, you know, large business revenues in less than a year. It did not make sense. We're trying to continue down that path. To the extent you want to branch off and perform in multiple areas, obviously you're going to graduate, and that's the timing and the step you should take at that point when you are looking to capture multiple awards. You should be graduating to large business. So that more or less summarizes what I wanted to say. Specifically, I'm going to pass on the microphone to Eric Cobb, my counterpart out in Denver, who has REO responsibilities, has several areas coming up for rebid, and he will give you his take on the actual requirements and where they're going. So, Eric?
Good morning. I am just going to provide a brief overview of the M&M 3 program. But first, again, I want to say welcome to Fort Worth. It's great to be here. I'm Eric Cobb, the REO Director in the Denver Homeownership Center. And of course, Texas is a state in our jurisdiction. It is our largest state. We have the largest inventory here, and we love Texas. We do. So I'm glad to be here today. I noticed in the audience there are a lot of familiar faces. Craig had mentioned being part of the M&M program and the different generations of M&M. Some of you have been part of this program a lot longer than I have. So I see some faces out there who have been from probably the inception. I became part of the program. I got to HUD about 7 years ago under M&M 2. And so I've been part of the M&M program since M&M 2, and I went into M&M 3. So again, some of those faces out there, and I know they've been here a lot longer than I have. I think is this we can operate the slides right here.
So point right here, Mr. Eric. Point to the clicker here.
Okay. Is it right here?
Yep.
Well, that probably went right. Also, I want to say good morning also to all the satellite offices out there. I don't want to forget those folks. There we go. Okay, great. Don't want to forget the satellite offices out there, and I know we have several, especially to our folks in Denver. And I know they're watching and being a part of this program. Some key components of the program that we have are the mortgagee compliance, property management, sales and marketing, and these functions, of course, they all interact with each other to provide a system of checks and balances in the M&M program. We also maintain a centralized case management system that's utilized by all of the contractors, and it's called our P260 system. We also have, as part of that system, we have an internet listing and bid site, which is called HUD Home Store. And these systems provide real-time property data, improved bid analysis, and reporting and oversight controls for the M&M program. Specific to M&M 3.8, we are transitioning to a system of single contractors per contract area. Under M&M 3 originally, we had multiple asset managers and multiple field service managers in a contract area. And if I'm absolutely correct. And for this solicitation, we are transitioning to one asset manager and one field service manager per contract area. So that's something that's going to be a little different under what we term now as the 3.7 and 3.8 solicitations. The program structure and again type contractors that are involved. The mortgagee compliance manager, that contractor ensures the mortgagee conveys the property in accordance with HUD standards. They are responsible to review requests for extension of time for conveyance. They also review requests for over allowable for P&P costs, and they also review title. Once a property is conveyed, our field service managers, and that's of course the particulars of this solicitation, the field service manager contractors, they perform initial inspections. And in that initial inspection, we talked about how the contractors have to kind of work together. So that initial inspection is also provided to the mortgagee compliance manager to ensure that that property was conveyed in conveyance condition or met the standards of HUDs for our conveyance condition. So that's something, that's a key component or a key task that field service managers would be doing in that initial inspection to just ensure that that property was conveyed correctly. The FSM also performs initial services. Those services include system checks. They also include changing out the locks, securing the property, initial security. They do all of those type services initially. Also, there are going to be certain property charges that the FSM will be responsible for paying. A lot of those will be, of course, reimbursable type payments. And then, of course, the FSM maintains the property on an ongoing basis until the property closes or is otherwise out of the inventory. Now, our asset managers, they perform sale and marketing functions. They oversee and manage the listing brokers. They coordinate closing activities, and they will also be responsible for some property payment on certain charges that are that we are obligated to pay. Under 3.8, again, this slide is just a overview of the functions that will be performed by the field service manager. And I need to comment about the payments. We are currently looking at moving most of the HOA and the utility payments to the asset manager. Nice. So I know you like those, especially current FSM. So in any case, I think that is going to provide for more expedient payments, which will help our closings. It helps out in a lot of situations that we have right now. Sometimes that interaction gets a little bogged down, so we are looking to make some of those changes. The field service manager will still be responsible for payments on any property that is not currently assigned to and asset manager. As I mentioned previously, our P260 case management system and bid site, it was established under M&M 3. Previously, each contractor maintained their own management system, and they also maintained their own kind of bid site. So now all of that is consolidated, and everything is input into one system. That consolidation is really greatly improved our oversight and then our reporting capabilities. This is just a screenshot of the P260 system. One screenshot. Now, after a property is ready to show and placed in ready to show condition, and that ready to show condition is a responsibility of the FSM contractor. You perform your initial services. There are some time frames involved with that, and the property must be placed in ready to show condition. After that, and it is assigned to an asset manager, that property is listed on our HUD home store as well as the local MLS systems. And then HUD home store provides the public with specific property information as well as contact information for the field service manager and the asset managers. And so that's where you would be listed at, and anyone interested in those properties could eventually give the field service manager a call or the asset manager a call. Now this next slide, it provides the geographical areas of the 4 homeownership centers. And it also shows the individual contract areas for the homeownership centers. For example, and I don't know how big this slide is on the screens, and it seems a little small here, but you know, in some of these places, shaded down in the right-hand side here, for the Atlanta Hawk, you have the different contract areas. And you know, it's kind of hard, it might be kind of hard to see, I'm not sure, but the different shades are the different contract areas. And they have the slides out there.
Yeah, to see it easier.
Are they in color? Did you have the color? Yeah, okay, it's in your packet. So you can see, for example, they're broken down. Atlanta, you have the 6A contract area. That's kind of in this area here, and then the other areas in the Hawks. Now this next slide is showing specifically the areas to be under the 3.8 solicitation. The colored areas are those areas that will be for the FSM 3.8 solicitation in those contract areas. So here we have areas for the Denver Homeownership Center, and then also for the Philadelphia Homeownership Center.
Save them for the panel. Okay.
Some things that we expect. We expect, of course, that the contractors are capable, and then they can address the specific challenges associated with the many different geographical areas and the different markets within those areas. HUD intends to increase our net return due to improved property maintenance and condition, and we, of course, expect enhanced customer service for all concerned. You can, again, these following websites provide additional information concerning FHA programs, and also some of the policies that are involved in the M&M program can be found on that second website. So that's a place that you definitely want to go to look at some of the mortgagee letters, housing notices, and different policies that affect the M&M program. Also, of course, we will be here to answer any of your questions after this meeting is over. And I know you have a lot of questions, a lot of things concerning the program, and we will be here to address those things. Again, I definitely want to introduce my boss, Ms. Ivory Hines. She's back in the back of the room there, but she is the director of the Office of Single Family Asset Management. She oversees the M&M program for the entire country. Ivory, would you stand up, please? Oh. And she just does a wonderful job, and she helps us out tremendously. So I want you to definitely know who she is. That's all I have as part of this overview. Again, we'll be here to answer any questions that you have concerning the M&M program and this particular 3.8 solicitation. I'll turn it back over to the MC.
Okay, next up we have Mr. Herbert Austin, who is the District Director for SBA.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody here. How are you, Director? When I got the call from Louis to join you today, I forgot to ask the important question, that is, what is the topic of discussion? That's the truth. Because had I known, I wouldn't be here. Somebody else would. So I just assumed that having spoken to a similar event at HUD 2 years ago, I assumed that it would have been the same format. You know, an audience wanted to hear about ESBA success stories. You know, the billions of dollars of loans that we make every year, the small business that we start every year. So that's what I had on my PowerPoint. But this is not for you, and I apologize for that. So just to give you a sense of how we structured, we have district offices, and like mine, where we cover all SBA programs, whether it's capacity building, the small business who wants to scale, who need help, the small business who need assistance in loan guarantees, where we do about 30 billion a year. And so we cover everything in that office. So next to my office, we have a government contracting division. So they should be here with you, where they have their own director, they have their own PCR working under them, and they can give you all the data. So as I was sitting here listening to a lot of experts, and I just kind of put something together about what we do in the contracting world. And if anyone is interested in knowing about the lending program at SBA, that is critical, because what we find, a lot of small businesses, they are able to get contracts, they cannot finance them. So we have specialized program for them as well. But as you may know, the SBA is really the gatekeeper for the government in terms of that 23%. As you know, 23% of all the buying in government must go to small businesses. That are about 28 million of them in the United States that we represent. And we are the gatekeeper in terms of working with the various buying agencies to make sure that they meet that statutory requirement. So we have one office of SBA, which is a government contracting, that actually works with the prime contractors, whether it's Lockheed Martin and the big guys, and also with in the federal government with the buying agencies. What my office does, we manage the set-aside program in procurement, and there are 4 of them. You know, if you look at it in a HUD zone, as you know, there is a 3% set aside for HUD zone, and we manage that out of my district office, not the government contracting office. If you're a women-owned business, there's a 5% set aside, and we also manage that out of my district office. If you're veterans, there is a 3% set aside for veterans under the government contracting arena. We also manage that our office, and most of all, we have the program called the 8A set aside program, you know, and there is also this 5% set aside. So if you are a business that is that meet those requirements, you can actually, you need to certify. You need to be certified to be either an 8A firm and a HUD zone firm. So when you think of a district office of the SBA, we manage about 16% of all the 23% that you hear about. You know, but the guys in the government contracting who can match all these people sitting here, you know, who can speak eloquently about what the government is doing in globally, you know, it's not me. So I hope you're not too, actually I'm embarrassed, but I hope you're not too offended. So, you know, of course, I would be more than happy to give you the name of the gentleman. His name is Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor is the guy whose job is to make sure that the government meets this 22%. And mine is a little bit different in that I work closely with firms. He works closely with buying agencies. I work closely with firms in trying to take them to the buying agencies so they can get contracts. So that would be my part of that's where I belong in that whole continuum, if you will. So so his name is Robert Taylor. Of course, I'm Herb Austin, and you know, we'll be here to answer any questions that you may have on the set-aside programs, and also on anything that has to do with SBA lending. And I know I'm repeating myself, but you know, there is a tough world out there for small businesses. You know, on one hand, we are saying we want to make sure that you get contracts from the government, and we assign goals to all. Then they come back to us and say we cannot get financing. So one of our tasks has been to create programs that the banks will accept so that they can take a look at the contract and say, well, it's a government contract, maybe it's a good collateral, you know, to use in order to provide money to the small business who need money so he can perform on that contract. So that would be my shop. So thank you so much. Again, we'll be here to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Mr. Austin. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Dana Moore out of our Atlanta office.
This is Atlanta. Can you hear us? Testing.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone for inviting us to partner with HUD today. I'm Dana Moore. I'm the Customer Service Director for the General Services Administration here in Region 4. I bring greetings from our Acting Regional Administrator, Mr. Irv Kaler, and thank very much Regional Administrator here in Texas, Regional Administrator Trevino, for having this event. Thank everybody here in Region 4 for inviting us. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the SAMS process and what's happened with SAMS. SAM is the System Award Management, which is a very important system that combines the information that we need to work with the vendors here. I want to give us a chance to get the presentation slides up, so we're running a few minutes behind. Okay. right, now that we have those up. As I said earlier, GSA is the owner of the SAM system. You manage that system for the federal government. Most of you who have experience as vendors know that you have to use the new SAM system. For new vendors, the CCR was the old system, which consisted of several different administrative systems where you actually did business with the federal government.
The microphone. Sorry, just give us 1 second. We're trying to get the microphone. Can you hear us without the microphone?
We can hear you here, Kristen.
Okay, can you hear Dana? Because she's far away from the microphone.
Yeah.
I'm right up. Okay.
Okay. So basically today, next slide please, what we want to do is let you know what SAMS has evolved to for those of you that haven't worked with the system before. We also want to give you a few tricks and tips to help you get adjusted with using SAMS. We also want to remind you of the timelines according to what you need to do, submit and have things communicated and updated. There's also some potential pitfalls that you might want to avoid, and we'll hopefully give you some information on that as well. There are some particular resources that are available to you within SAMS, with the Federal Service Help Desk, and we want to make sure that you know how to use that particular resources as opposed to contacting your HUD administrators and other folks related to that. And we also want to gauge from the audience if you need future information about SAMS. So with that said, next slide please. For those of you that don't know, the System for Award Management is a combined system now that consolidated all the capabilities of the CCR, the FedReg, ORCA, and EPLS. I just want to remind for the new vendors that there is no registration fee for this site, even though there are a lot of for-profit entities out there who sell you this service of helping you get registered. It is not necessary that you use that. The SAMS registration is a free service. All of the services with the .gov website are free services, including getting your EIN, TIN, even the Dun & Bradstreet number, which is assigned by a private organization, is a free service to obtain that D&B number. So I just want to remind everyone of that information for new vendors. For others, I think most often some public entities don't realize that that service is free and that there are a lot of for-profit industries out there. So please do be careful. All of the registrations for this program are at no cost, and they should have a .gov website. Next slide, please.
Fort Worth, I think you're 1 slide ahead of us. We're on the slide that says, what was the system landscape? Just to make sure.
So just to tie everything together, for those of you that don't know, the procurement process from the government aspect includes generating the requirement all the way to contract closeout. Now, SAMS and the other systems are supported by a number of technology systems used across the federal government. Most of you may or may not realize that we use that system to do business and exchange information throughout the government. So as you're registering in SAMS, we've now condensed the central contractor registration, ORCA, and EPLS, for those of you that don't know, into the SAMS registration system. So for instance, if your business has been defunct, or you're restarting, or you've been ill and you're getting back on your feet, but you did have a D&B number in a prior CCR or ORCA database, that information has been moved to a consolidated area, and SAMS will access that information as you begin to re-register. So we're going to go through the things that you need to do, the things you need to have on hand, whether you're a new business or a current business. We also want to remind people to update that information frequently. Check and make sure that it's correct. Make sure that your NICS codes and the other information is in compliance with the types of requirements that you're pursuing here as you're working with HUD, as well as with any federal agency. Those are important things that the contracting officer has to comply with, and it helps you as a business to make sure that that information is current. So basically, next slide please. What we've done with SAMS is try to get rid of all of the siloed and redundant systems. Basically, you should have one login, and all of these systems are going to communicate now together. Next slide, please. That's more cost effective for us as well as for you as taxpayers. In this particular SAMS Phase 1 capabilities, we also have things things like the assistance of the program catalog, federal program catalog assistance, and you're able to actually access information about all contracting officers and agencies across the government. So the wage data and the ESRS and other systems are also combined in there. Next slide, please. Basically now you have this one login, and we're able to actually go directly into SAMS to get all the information that you need to work with the federal government and to do business with us. So please make sure you understand the types of roles that you need. Also make sure that you have secure information with your logons, IDs, passwords, that you're keeping that information together and consistent in the history of your business. I'm going to tell you about the website Help Desk. Primarily what we want you to be aware of is that the Federal Service Desk is the one who helps you with your help requests, not the contracting officers or other information or other administrators that are available directly with the HUD agency. The Federal Service Desk is your primary assistance, and I'll tell you how to access that information. We also want you to understand the user roles. There are multiple user roles involved with SAMS. It's not just your business entity. You also need your individual user accounts. You also want to make sure that someone has an administrative role in that process. Also, we want to make sure that you're careful to make sure that when employees leave your organization, whether you're a government entity or a business entity, that you change their administrative role or that you remove them from the use of your information. We do not have control of that. So it's very important that you keep your information secure and your personal contact information in there about your business entity remain secure when you make sure that you remove users who are not with your company or your organization anymore. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to do now. For those of you that are new vendors, please make sure that you go to sam.gov. Again, that's a GOV ending website. Make sure that you have the updated training materials there and that you're able to register and that you do give yourself ample time in the timeline involved. Again, this is your effort to do business with the government, so there are a lot of checks and balances in this system. So once you enter your information, it's confirmed and validated. For example, your EIN or TIN number is going to be confirmed and validated. So there's a period for turnaround time in that. We ask for 7 days. Sometimes it happens earlier, 24 to 48 hours. However, there's also a validation of your DMV number. It's cross-referenced and checked. There's other validations of your cage number, which is going to be automatically assigned if you don't have one. So there is some processing time involved here. Waiting to the last minute to update this information can put you at risk for being responsive and being found responsive if you don't have the right NICS codes, if you're not updated. Also, your payment information is in there. Your valid checking account, routing numbers, and that sort of information is in there as well. That's a way that we find information about how to pay you. Your POCs need to be updated in there as well. Your points of contact for SAMS, for contracting offers, also for all of your financial needs are in there as well. Make sure that information is updated as people exit and enter your organization. And the same applies for the government as well. Okay, so current and past users, you can obtain all of your IDs and access previously used if you have your entry information working with the Federal Service Desk. So again, I also want to remind you, here's what the SAMS website looks like for those of you that hasn't been there. Next slide, please. Next one. That's okay. Your SAMS website here. There are 3 different things that you need to realize. You're going to need a user account, which is an individual account. The other thing that you'll need is your entity account. So make sure that you understand the difference between the two, which I'm going to explain a little bit. If you're a past business or you're changing information about your business so you don't have everything handy, you are able to search the records and get some of your basic information and be able to start to try to re-enter or update your entity. Next slide, please. Again, your individual user account needs to have an authorized administrator. You want to make sure that you do have someone in your organization who has administrative privileges. Again, if you have someone that leaves your organization, you want to change that person's user role or remove them completely if they're no longer associated with your organization. You do have that separate entity account for new individuals registering as SAMS. So you have 3 different areas that you need to pay attention to. That's your individual user accounts, your administrator accounts, and then your entity account. Someone has to be the administrator to be able to connect and authorize changes with your entity account. You do need your DMB, and so we require that you get that, or we suggest that you get your DMB number first, because this can be a hard or soft stop in the system. You need to make sure that you have that information on hand and you're able to move forward with your registration. If you're a new entity, if you're forming a new joint venture partnership, or you're updating information, the same applies to you. You can work within other areas of SAM, but without your Dun & Bradstreet number, you're not going to get validated and be able to go through the complete process. So it's very helpful that you have that number on hand before you start. Your Dun & Bradstreet number should also be available to you, next slide please, along with a name and address associated with that DUNS should you not have the exact information about your organization and you're trying to get help from the Federal Service Desk. You will need a taxpayer identification number or entity number, so you need to register that if you don't have it. You need to get a new one if you don't have it. So those are things that will slow the system down. Again, those are both free services, and I'm going to identify that on the next slide just to make sure you have a picture of that website in your mind so you know what it looks like, and to avoid you from going to foreign payment services that are out there who do charge fees. Again, I want to remind everyone that all of these services are free. Registering for your DUNS number is free. Registering in SAMS is free. Registering for your TIN and EIN is free. But there are websites out there when you do Google searches that will direct you to for-profit entities. You do not have to pay for these services. So that's one advantage for the people who didn't have that information previously. Please pass that on to other folks. It's very important that you know that. So I want to show you right quickly what that DMB website looks like. Thank you, ma'am. Within that small paragraph, you may not be able to see the writing, but at the DMB website, it tells you right there that your number assignment is free for all businesses required to register with the U.S. federal government for contracts for grants. So make sure that you can register online if you have access to the internet. If you're sight or hearing impaired, there's a phone number you can dial. You can do that by phone. Let them know that you're trying to register within the SAM system and that you need to make sure that your DUNS number is verified through the SAM system. Again, there's a matchup between your DMB with your SAM's registration. So it's very important that you get that done in advance of things. Next slide, please. So I want to give you a helpful hint. Again, we want to emphasize that the SAM system is owned by the Federal Service Desk. I'm pretty sure most of you that are doing business with the government already know that you have to be registered in SAMS. What you may not realize is that the Federal Service Desk is the source of your help. So I want to make sure today that you have that website, which is www.fsd.gov. Is that franksamdavid.gov. I'm also going to recommend for the new businesses or people that need to make changes that you print out something from the FSD website. Can you go forward to the website? Next slide. At that fsd.gov website, this is the source for all assistance with SAMS and several of the other databases that you need to register in to do business with the government. It's not your contracting officer, it's not HUD, it's not GSA, it's not the technical officer's representative. When it comes to dealing with SAMS, FSD is your primary source of getting information corrected. You should also let those individuals know if you have some challenges or problem with SAMS or something is not reporting correctly so that they're aware of that and your payments are going to the right place. However, to get those matters corrected, it has to start with the fsd.gov location. So here is a helpful hint for you. At fsd.gov, if you go to the topic, the help topics in the top left corner of your screen, you can see there and it tells you, how do I access or register my business in SAM? If you select that information, you can print it out. It turns into about a 2-page printable, easy to follow instruction, easy to remind you of what you need to do, what documents you need to have on hand. It's the simplest area of instructions about how to use SAM. You can find that information again at fsd.gov. The reason why, again, I'm telling you about FSD is the help desk for SAMs and for these other electronic systems that you use. That applies to the government as well. If you're having some connectivity issues or interface issues, things are not reporting, you need to let the FSD.gov help desk know about that. The good thing about this for business owners is that it's available after hours. If you register for an account in the top right-hand corner, which is very short to do, you can also send text messages or email messages or, instant messages to that particular website via account. They are open from 8 to 8 during the day, but it also helps you facilitate and go on, get your questions submitted, and they can get back to you. There is also a phone line that you can call during the day, but there tends sometimes to be a backup or wait. You have the alternate message system that you can use, as well as emailing. So those are helpful hints on how to get any assistance you need with SAMS by using this information. Again, it's an easy printable instruction that consists of about 2 pages. Next slide, please. Just want to remind everyone, when you're calling in or when you're developing your site, you need to make sure that you have your DUNS number. For other agencies, it may be a DUNS number and a DODAT, your name, your address. For new businesses, a CAGE code is going to be assigned to you within this process. You do not have to obtain the CAGE code. It's going to be given to you once you get through a certain phase of this process. Your TIN, EIN number, those are things that you have to obtain. Again, it's similar to your DUNS number, but again, no charge for those services. There's no charge for any of these numbers to be assigned. Your assertions, the things that you are going to comply with in your federal contract or your bid for federal contract is also in here. So you need to know offhand what types of goods and services your organization is providing or exchanging with the government. You need to know your NICS codes, and if you're involved in any EDI and disaster relief information, that would apply as well. Just to let you know, I want to remind you of the Federal Service Desk hours there. Next slide, please. And again, they're open from 8 to 8. But also I wanted to let you know the other systems that the Federal Service Desk supports are the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance. That helps you find information about all of the contracting officers across the country that are involved in contracting. So you can find that information with all of their contact information. That's now electronic. It used to be a pretty cumbersome manual document, and then it was located someplace else. So now it's located here with the SAMS website as well. Again, your electronic subcontract reporting system is all managed by the Federal Service Desk. So you're able to get any assistance you need about that system as well. The FBO or FedBiz Ops is also managed to the Federal Service Desk. So if you have any problems with sign-ins or usage, the FSD, Federal Service Desk, is your choice for assistance. And also the FAFATA sub-award system is managed by the Federal Service Desk. So all the help that you need, whether government or industry, is available through the Federal Service Desk for these particular electronic systems. Again, previously the printout will show you what representations you need, what certifications you need. Also, your points of contact will have to be added in these particular systems. You can go on. Next slide. Basically, what we're here to tell you is that help is available for you to use the SAM system. The Federal Service Desk is that primary source of assistance. There is a multi-tiered desk, so they should be able to handle your request. So don't struggle through any changes. We do want to remind you to update that information because contracting officers such as those here at HUD look at that information and assist them in what they do with you. The other areas that pay you also look at that information. So it has to be up to date, should be accurate, and should be timely submitted. Okay, just want to remind in the next slide about the system interfaces. If you're an agency or a vendor who is using some sort of interface system and you're still having any challenges, you need to have updated your fields and make sure that you're matching the SAM data model. So again, please contact the Federal Service Desk, not the particular agencies such as HUD who are offering these requirements to get any interface issues resolved or looked at. For the agencies who have interfaces with SAMs and you may have some outdated information or you may have some errors reporting, please make sure that you contact the Federal Service Desk as well as your interface system to let both agencies know that you do have a potential reporting error. Next slide. So this is our reminder that SAM did merge into multiple databases. Again, if you're an existing business or a defunct business and you've ever been in one of these particular databases, SAM still has that information. So if you try to input your DUNS number, SAMS is going to pull that up. You have to make sure that you have all of the relevant information that you had when you initially applied for that DUNS number. If you do not have that information, you need to go go directly to the Federal Service Desk and see if they can help you restore or set up a new identity. Again, you're going to need to connect your administrator's role with your entity role. So we want to remind you that that's a separate role. It needs to be maintained. Finally, we just want to make sure that you have a basic understanding of SAMS and how it helps you do business with the federal government. These various systems and purposes are now combined to have one main entry point to facilitate cost savings and ease for the organizations that are using the system, both internal and external for the federal government. So remember to be timely with your endeavors with SAM, whether you're changing or updating information. It may take you several weeks to get this information matched up and verified in the system. Understand the logic of your roles. Make sure that you keep the information about SAMS accessible but secure and current. That means your done and bad and other database information that's exchanged needs to be current. We recommend that you check this information each 6 months, but also be mindful that Dun & Brad and other systems may retire or inactivate your system if you don't have activity. So organizations need to be aware of the interfaces associated. Please work with the Federal Service Desk as your primary source of user assistance in troubleshooting and solving problems. Also, more importantly, be aware of the non-GOV websites that charge a fee for these services. They should all be free. Finally, we just want to let you know that GSA is a partner to the federal agencies that are participating here, such as HUD, the SBA, but we're also a partner to the commercial industry. We have our own vendor support center, which has a lot of information about growing your business, obtaining contracts, and schedules that GSA has. HUD and other agencies use those schedules quite frequently. There's training information there. That website is the vsc.gsa.gov. Though all the services there are free, it gives you information about our Mentor Protege program, about the schedules programs that are used by agencies like HUD, the SBA, and others. There's information and free training there on how to get a schedules contract and the information related to that. Schedules is a little bit different than an IDIQ or an individual agency contract, but it's another source of business for small and large business. We do support both prime and small businesses and have about 90% of our contracts in the small business arena as well. This next slide. So that vendor support center, just so you have a mental picture of what it looks like, it is a free service as well with lots of resources made available to vendors. It's accessible 24 hours a day. Next slide. And one of the examples that we mentioned was the schedules, contractor success, marketing matters. Those are some of the training that we offer there as an additional resource to industry. Again, that's at the vsca.gov website. Next slide. We also have our own Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization here in Region 4, and we provided that information. Ms. Rebecca Vanover, she's located here in Peachtree. All of this information is available at the www.gsa.gov website and also the individual SAMs and FSD websites that we've provided. We did also want to let you know my contact information, which is my first name spelled a little bit differently, is D as in David, H as in Hannah, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy, A as in Apple, .more@gsa.gov. And for the federal employees attending today, we will be giving continuous learning points. You can send an email to my email address, and I will issue you a CLP certificate. And for the vendors, we're interested in knowing if you need more information about SAMs or other related information that we provide in the GSA resources that can help you with your requirements development. So please take down my information. Feel free to contact us and provide information about what we're doing, okay? Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon and look forward to working with you all.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moore. Okay, at this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break before we get to the next speaker. So please limit it to 10 minutes. Okay, so our next speaker is going to be Mr. Louis Bogan. He's the contracting officer from Atlanta.
Hello, everyone. I need to make some more acknowledgement. Again, I would like to thank Mr. Trevino for having us here. I'd like to thank all the senior management for attending, and most of all, thank you guys for attending. I would also like to thank Bernice Brown in the Denver office, Shelley Wallace in the Philadelphia office, Melissa Fox and Jimmy Scott in the headquarters office, and of course, everyone in the Atlanta office. I want to thank you all for assisting me in putting this on. Also, I would like to identify the team that will be awarding 3.8 in the Atlanta office. I have Senior Contracting Officer Joy Farr Scott, Contract Specialist Monique Williams, and Contracting Officer Simone Terry. Those three women will probably keep me on track, believe me. I just have a few things that I need to put out to you guys. We are still finalizing the set-asides, and this award will be based on the FAR Part 15. And I know some of you are wondering, is it going to be LIPTA or is it going to be trade-off? Well, that question won't be answered today. These are the areas, again, that Mr. Cobb had pointed out, and I want you guys to recognize that in the Philly Hawk, that area has changed a little bit. Ohio is now its own contract area, which before I think it fell under Area 2P. You must be in SAMs at the time of award. I can't control that. That is governed by the FAR. The current Nexus code is 531311, residential property managers. In the solicitation, all areas are important, but I want you guys to concentrate, well not concentrate, but really show a little emphasis on Section C, the PWS. I know some of you are old players, and I know some of you are current players. The PWS does change, so please read it. Read it. Read it. Because if you come back with questions after the awards are made, I'm going to have to fight with this young man here, and he's a tough cookie, I can tell you. So please read Section C carefully. Section H, special clauses and special instructions. Please read that carefully, because that is the conflict of interest section. Section K, if you're not in SAMs at the time of proposal, you can self-certify, and you will have that information in the solicitation. But at the time of award, you must be in SAMs. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you're not in SAMs, we will move on to the next player. Section L, instructions to offers. As with Section C, you have to read it. You have to read it, and you have to read it. Those are the instructions. Those are the instructions that will tell you everything that you have to submit to me in order for your proposals to pass and go on to the evaluation phase. So if you miss something, I can't help you. So please take the time to read section F. Section M, the evaluation factors, and of course, I hope you guys take the time to read that thoroughly, because that's what's gonna grade you and determine if you possibly afford an award or not. After we finish, at this time, I want all of you to write down any questions that you have, and we're gonna have a discussion with the panel here. Feel free to ask any questions of any panel member. And Mr.
Sonia.
Yeah, he will be taking care of picking up the questions and reading the questions. Since we are limited on time, we only gonna read 1 or 2 questions per site, maybe 3 or 4. So please take this time now and write down any questions that you have, and we'll get started with the discussion. Also, if you have any other questions after you leave today, you can email them to Kristen Tucker, and the email is in the package, but you must remember she can only answer certain questions. A lot of information that you wanna ask, we just can't answer at this time until the solicitation is posted. So please, at this time, write your questions down. And everyone in the field who is taking up the questions, we will rotate the questions. Each site will get a chance to ask several questions. So, all right, take about 5 minutes.
Michelle Hayes from Osterville was gracious enough to actually let us know that the HUD FY 214 small business goals were in fact passed. So I hadn't even gotten wind of these yet, but the prime small business goal will be 40.72%. That's 40.72%. That's prime contracts to small businesses in FY14. The subcontracting goal for small businesses will be 55%. SDVs is 5% both at the prime and the sub level, as is woman-owned small businesses awards 5 and 5%. The service disabled veteran-owned small business goal is 3% for the prime and 3% for subcontracting, and the HUD zone goal is 3% at the prime and 3% for the subcontracting. Specifically worth noting there, I know historically we've had a difficult time meeting the HUD zone goal, in particular due to the requirements as far as the employees actually residing within the HUD zone a certain percentage, and also the performance having to take place in the HUD zone, where our areas span relatively large sectors. So I don't know how easily that will be achievable under M&M, but it's something we certainly strive for. So for any of the HUD zones in the room, or in any of the field offices, definitely, tout that as one of your strengths, in presenting to HUD, because I know historically we have had a high difficulty meeting our HUD zone goals.
Okay, so as Louis said, we'll start with some questions here, then we're going to rotate through the field offices for different sites. So, Brian, you want to go first?
Okay. First question I have is, will HUD consider requiring the line of credit amount to be reduced to $250,000? And will HUD consider requiring the line of credit to be part of the actual RFP?
You guys probably won't like this answer, but you're gonna have to wait until you see the solicitation.
I will add something to that. The line of credit specifically, I realize it's difficult to obtain, but the reason it was historically established rather than specifically, we do performance and payment bonds on the FSM contracts. We don't do a separate bid bond. However, we had required a separate line of credit historically, specifically because we asked for the small business areas, you as the business rely on it, not HUD. Typically, you're using that as your upfront financing to run operations until you're paid by HUD. And we can tell you with absolute certainty there are a lot of small businesses who wouldn't have been able to maintain those operations if they had not been able to secure that line of credit. So to the extent you're having difficulty, obviously reach out to SBA on that as well. But don't be afraid to look at teaming, partnering, joint venturing, any other possible structure, both with other smalls and or large business, to help you get what you need as far as securing lines of credit. But I can tell you it's probably unlikely that the amount would be reduced. We would have to look at it based on volume and what the areas entail and what we're estimating monthly invoicing to be. I mean, specifically, like I said, it's built around your operations to let us know that you will have the cash reserves and cash outflow to pay your subcontractors and to stay operational.
All right.
Okay, the next question, will the sign-in list be provided to the attendees?
I don't really see a reason why the attendees would need this sign-in list. Can I ask who asked that question? Is there a reason you would need the sign-in list? Oh, okay. So it's possible for small businesses. Okay.
For anybody in attendance today, to the extent that you hadn't already, I would encourage you to register in FedBizOps, FVO.gov. You can sign on. If you register, the benefit is you can sign on as an interested party. Anybody in attendance, I would encourage to do that, because specifically it will not only expose you to potentially small business players, but you'll know who's interested in competing. That way, that list will make sure that it is in fact public and that you'll be able to download the copy and reach out. The worst thing that can happen in reaching out, you'll meet somebody new. They may still say no, but at least you have that opportunity as a small business to reach out for those specific opportunities. I'm guessing that's why the specific question was asked.
Okay.
Okay, the next question. When do you expect the contract to be released and awarded?
Tentative in about 60 days. It could be sooner, but I very seriously doubt if it'll be any longer. So just continuously check FBO or Fed Connect, and you shouldn't miss it.
You're talking about the RFP, isn't it?
Right.
Released in 60
The
days.
RFP. The award, the target award date is sometime this summer. Late June, July, August, sometime, one of those months.
All right, next question.
Okay, are the existing contract areas staying the same, or will they be broken into smaller areas?
As of right now, the map that's in your package, that is the map that we're going with as of this moment. There's always a possibility that it could change, and the new map will be in the solicitation if it's changed. So.
Hold on, Brian.
I actually wanted to encourage some dialogue on that specific subject. So, Brian, I may ask you to move around if people want to ask additional questions on that specific topic, both the size of the areas as well as the specific set-asides. Set-asides obviously are going to be, the final decisions will be made both on the responses we got to the sources sought notice, but also specifically if the size of the areas change. We did receive some feedback from the sources sought, specifically that the 1D and 2D areas made it difficult for small businesses to perform. We'll need to weigh that specifically against the number of awards from a contract administration drill as well. It's a conversation I know Ivory, Eric, myself, and all of the REO directors actually have been balancing for some time and weighing. No final decisions have been made on that. It'll only be finalized as of solicitation. But specifically, the way it's looking right now, a lot of the areas will be able to go at least small business set aside. There certainly will be opportunities, particularly we got pretty good interest from 8A vendors as well as there were some SDVOSBs as well, service disabled veteran-owned small businesses. Under the NAICS specifically, it's not one of the historically, I don't want to say underutilized because that'd be a hub zone term, but I forget the specific terminology. I know for woman-owned small business, it's not one of the underrepresented, I think, is what 531311. So we wouldn't have the authority specifically to go woman-owned small business set aside. But I do want to thank the number of woman-owned small businesses specifically that came out, because there were a lot that responded to the sources sought notice. If there's anybody that has any specific questions, though, or comments, things they'd like us to take into consideration that you may not have said, in your sources sought response or anything else, feel free to use this as a forum. Just raise your hand now that if you would like to comment on that specifically.
I'll make one comment, Craig.
Since you're so close, Marla, I'll pass you this one.
The comment that I made in responding to the sources sought notice, and I know this is problematic to implement, but the way Region 6 lies, it's seriously storm central. To do property field services management all along the Gulf Coast, including Texas and Louisiana, we learned in M&M 2 can be extremely daunting, especially for small business, when you have a series of catastrophic storms which tend to happen, and then further north it's tornado area. So my thought was that Texas could be its own contract area with maybe a division on the date line to add the Western Panhandle, El Paso area into the New Mexico contract area, and that might influence small business respondents, because North Texas and South Texas then have different weather patterns, and that would give us one good size contract area. But again, I know this is difficult to implement, so I just would like to submit that some consideration for dividing it up like you did with Ohio and Michigan might be beneficial for small business as well as for the government.
Thanks, Marla. Were there any other comments? It's something we'll certainly take into advisement, and it's something that was on our radar and has been on our radar. We need to finalize those decisions. It's looking like the rest of the map, besides 1D, 2D, will pretty much stay locked in. I don't think there would be any other future changes. We were able to divide up the Philadelphia HOC pretty easily, based on our discussions. It was a question around, like I said, our ability to manage multiple contract areas, both with our staff from a contracting and an REO staff, GTR standpoint. But it's something we are certainly taking under advisement.
Thanks.
All right, we'll take a couple more, Brian.
Okay, will there be a limit to the number of areas a small business can be awarded?
No, at this time, you can be awarded all the areas, but we would certainly look at your capability to be awarded more than one area. Well, your capacity to be awarded more than one area.
This is one I addressed somewhat in the keynote. I tiptoed around it a little bit, and I'm not afraid to speak candidly about it. I am also interested in everyone from an industry standpoint's feedback on this very topic. I mean, realistically, the proposal the technical proposal often looks very similar across multiple areas. So to the extent that based on how the contract is structured, you receive a high technical rating in one area, the possibility is that you're going to receive a high technical rating across the board. Then a lot of it obviously comes into price, whether it's LIPTA or best value. So there is that possibility that, contractors are able to capture multiple areas, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but I also, have, from a HUD perspective, the intent of, trying to do as much as I can to share the wealth, because I know a lot of you, aren't looking to have everything under the sun. You're looking to get your foot in the door and capture one area, that just to start out. And to the extent that we can offer flexibilities, we had some discussions from an evaluation factor standpoint, of looking at things like capacity. It's a difficult thing to get a hold of from an evaluation standpoint and be objective about it, though. And specifically, obviously I don't want to tiptoe down a route that's going to expose us to more potential for protest or anything else. We issue something that puts a cap straight up on the number of awards you all as contractors get. The first thing, several of you at least do is file a protest as far as unduly restrictive. I think in a single award environment, specifically moving from multiple award to single award, shifting from 3.0 to even 3.5 and 3.6, what we're going to face on the administrative side is, to the extent a contractor starts dropping the ball, we need to be able to look heavily at realignment rather than termination, at least as, the immediate, because going down the termination path, I won't say it's not a reasonable alternative, because it's always there and contractors know it, but realignment often allows the contractor, without us taking everything, to get back up on their feet again if they start to fall down, if they do in fact get overwhelmed. So specifically, to the extent one contractor gets all the awards, guess what? That one contractor starts falling down, there's nobody to realign to from a practical standpoint as well. I think Ivory would agree with me on that I see her nodding her head back there. So it is something that we definitely grapple with. I'm willing to, have those candid conversations to try and figure out how to structure it such. One of the things, like I said, measuring capacity is something that's huge. Capacity is always going to be something at the forefront as far as small business set-asides, with the responsibility determination as well. And to the extent that we can't issue a positive responsibility determination in a set-aside area, we lean heavily on SBA for a certificate of competency. So it's something, that we've looked at in the past, but it's a question of how can you build it specifically into the contract requirements, do it effectively, efficiently, and still, be able to do it without running the risk of a sustained protest, at least in that area. I like people having the ability to compete specifically, but I would love to be able to narrow down the number of awards we make to individual firms, just to be able to give that opportunity to spread the wealth.
Hi, Fort Worth, this is Atlanta. Do you mind if we take questions from one of the other hubs?
Okay.
Yeah, we can go.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and start with Atlanta then.
Would the AM perform the utility HOA condo research on the properties? And if not, would the FSM do the research and pay the initial payments to those companies?
Yes, we will expect that if the AM is going to be responsible for the HOA and utilities, that they would do the research and they would make those payments. There will be circumstances where properties are not assigned to an AM, held off market, etc., and then the FSM would be responsible for those payments.
Is it a requirement that my business entity be on the GSA schedule in order to submit my FSM, my proposal for FSM or AM services?
No, answer would be no, correct.
Will the materials from the seminar be available, and where?
The question and answers and a copy of the presentation will be uploaded on FBO and FedConnect. It'll probably be uploaded in a week or so.
Does Sam do your taxes or tell you how much you owe on taxes? I'm still here. Can you hear me? Okay, this is Dana from GSA. Thank you. No, Sam does not do your taxes. I'm sorry? No, we do not do your taxes. It does not involve that. The only reference that I made to taxes was getting your EIN number or your TIN number. Those numbers are assigned by the IRS, and you have to have that information in order to enter that information into SAM's to be registered. That's the only thing. Thank you. Those are all the questions we have in Atlanta for right now.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we move over to headquarters.
Okay, can you all hear us?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, first question is, will all regions or areas indicated for competition be issued at the same time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next question is, although you said you wouldn't say whether it was going to be trade-off or LPTA, can you explain the difference between the two?
I'll field that one. I've gotten a lot of feedback, even part of from the sources sought responses as well on this. And specifically, both obviously fall under FAR Part 15 as best value. Low price technically accepted LIPTA is what we did last go around for 3.6. We had some specific complaints on it. To the extent that we would go LIPTA again, I can tell you we would look at making some specific changes to address some of those complaints. Realistically, low price technically acceptable works very well in an environment where there is nothing of technical superiority to trade off for. Specifically, the services under field service management lend themselves. I mean, there are only so many ways to cut the grass. Really, HUD's interested in the end outcome. You did it or you didn't do it. You either cleaned out the property or you didn't do it. To the extent you're performing, sometimes you need to raise the bar and make sure that everybody is proposing to the same standard. I think historically with 3.6 at least, that was somewhat of a problematic area. I'll be the first to say, we're not perfect in that regard. As far as if we were to go down that path, I would look for things of the nature of capping exposure from a cost perspective so that contractors are making assumptions where there are ambiguities, things like debris removal, what are the, what's the limitation I may have to bear as a contractor. Otherwise, you run the risk of, either building too much fluff in and not being competitive, or not building enough in and exposing you to potential losses. That's not fair from a government perspective, and that's certainly not our intent. We don't want the winners and losers to be made in an area of ambiguity. Specifically, to the extent that we can narrow down those assumptions, things like health and safety as well. What are the caps of our exposures under those things? We're looking actively at the possibility of doing that. To the extent that we would go best value trade-off, the question I would pose really to everyone in the room is, what should we be trading off for on an FSM? I think you can tell where I lean, and it's hard for me, to mask that, but I realistically, when I turn a requirement over, I'm not going to tell Lewis or Marie when Marie has the AM piece of it as well. I'm not going to tell my staff how to conduct the requirement. It's theirs to run. They're all unlimited warrants. They have the authority. But specifically, we would need that question answered. What are we trading off for? And to the extent you are making a trade-off, I would even encourage program to help us define that, spell it out in section M of the solicitation. What are the things that are really innovative and of value that would be, something we are willing to pay more money, assuming you are proposing the same level of, or are not performing or proposing the same level of service in that environment.
Okay, headquarters.
Okay. Next question. Whose job is it to check on the field service manager? Some companies have developed a quality assurance inspection. Does HUD have this in place?
The listing brokers serve as a quality check for the field service managers and the work that they do. We also require listing brokers to provide inspections. We will actually, under 3.7, require additional inspections. And so those will be serving as additional quality checks. Also, HUD staff performs quality checks and inspections along with the other entities.
And what I would say on that as well, obviously, to the extent the AM, another contractor overseeing, an FSM, another contractor's performance, obviously everything is channeled through the GTR. Just because the AM writes up a WAN doesn't mean necessarily that the work order notification doesn't mean that whatever they're writing up is a legitimate concern. We see them all the time, so I know Eric's staff focuses on that. Really, they're looking to verify the GTR is that individual who's verifying, is this a legitimate concern, is it not a legitimate concern, prior to us holding the FSM accountable. But realistically, that was a large piece of the decision to separate the FSM and AM services, to the extent that the properties weren't ready to show in the past and the FSM hadn't performed everything needed to be done to move the property in ready to list condition. Obviously, if they had responsibility for the sole piece, they would, had no incentive to tattle on themselves, so to speak. So realistically, that's why there is that heavy reliance there. There also has been some shift, and there is some dialogue going on behind the scenes. No final decisions have been made, but it's something that you all should be aware of. There's been a candid dialogue going back and forth about possibility upping the number of pre-conveyance inspections on that end as well, to ensure, because I know as an FSM, a lot of times you receive properties with significant surchargeable damage from the mortgage. To the extent that we can make some of those decisions before we pay out claims values and use more of that. It was specifically a separate line item for the FSM, even under the 3.0 contracts, but it's gone largely unused, except in instances where the MCM was reporting, potential conflicts, I guess, with the actual packages themselves. So to the extent that we can actually better define what we're getting early in the process, I think we'll be in a better position. And there also is, possibility long-term. I know Charles and Ivory have had more candid conversations. They recognize that FSM, AM, going down our traditional disposition process is a costly endeavor, and to the extent that we have, let's face it, some dog properties out there, we may start looking at alternate disposition strategies as well to try and move inventory more quickly and be more responsive. So there may be opportunities outside the traditional FSM AM environment as well.
Okay. One more, headquarters.
Yep. One last question from headquarters. Will there be subcontracting goals on the contract?
This is what I'll say. It's going to depend largely on whether the contract, first of all, the area is set aside. To the extent that it's a set aside area, the answer is small businesses aren't required to submit a formal subcontracting plan. Would we encourage them, to the extent that they're subcontracting, still to subcontract with other small businesses? Absolutely. I mean, contractually, they're limited, to the 50% rule from a prime standpoint. They can't subcontract more than the 50% to large. Looking at it from, if the areas would go unrestricted, I would say we would have a heavy hand basically in negotiating those with Ostabu specifically, looking at it both, from an evaluation standpoint, what is the business capable of, to the extent that those relationships have already been forged, but making sure that they can actually meet those goals. If we're going to award to a large business, we want to make sure that small business is benefiting from it.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. All right, let's take some from Denver now.
Hi, this is Denver. We had a couple of questions related to the timeline for the acquisition. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. I was wondering because the camera didn't switch, so, which is fine. And just to reiterate, just to make sure we understood the answers, the expectation is that the solicitation will be released sometime within the next 60 days with a target award date, hopefully of sometime this summer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Okay. And I just got one more question, which I haven't read yet. So, does HUD foresee an increase in asset sales pre-foreclosure to private equity firms, and if so, what percentage?
Ivory, you want to grab a mic? I don't know how definitively she'll be able to answer the question because it'll be unique to the areas. I will say this, our intent will be to share as much historical and the trends of where the volumes are going prior to the solicitation going live and as part of the solicitation itself.
So could you repeat the question?
Sure. Does HUD foresee an increase in asset sales pre-foreclosure to private equity firms, and if so, what percentage? What percentage increase?
So the way I would answer the question is that obviously, and Craig mentioned was spot on, FHA is looking at ways to increase the return and the financial soundness of the mortgage insurance fund. So we're always looking at ways to increase our net return. As a result of that, what we have learned and been focused on since we, I think within the past 2 years or so, recently established an Office of Risk. What they have taught us is that the sooner we can get that asset, as many of you already know who've been in the business for many years, the less hit we take from a loss severity side. So as a result of that, we are in fact increasing our, what we refer to as loan sales, and increasing the assets that go into those sales, the non-performing loans. We're also looking at increasing sales to third-party bidders, which many of you know as sheriff sales, and encouraging a number of our larger FHA-approved servicers to participate in those sales because we get better returns there. And quite naturally, as a number of industry players are doing, we're increasing or improving upon and streamlining our pre-foreclosure sale so that we have more pre-foreclosure sales, because those are the three areas, and two of the three, more specifically, the third-party sales, which we refer to as claims without conveyance of title, and also the pre-foreclosure sales, we actually do better than what we do on the returns for REO conveyance, because we have the significant costs attributed to the management marketing program and paying contractors. So we're trying to balance all those things, and I hope I've addressed the inquirer's questions.
Okay. Okay, we switch over to Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, everybody. Our first question is, will the changes to move the HOA and utility payment management process from the FSM to the asset managers be effective under 3.8 only in the areas of current solicitation, or will the change impact all FSMs?
Eventually, I think the answer is you would almost, to the extent that you're making the switch, you would have to look at a potential modification to the existing, especially since the 3.7 asset management solicitation, which Industry Day obviously coming up on the 22nd, I'm sure you're all aware of it, will also include the Atlanta Hawks. So to the extent that you would have an existing 3.6 FSM performing in the Atlanta Hawk, and there's a change to the AM requirement making them now responsible, we would have to look at, we wouldn't have duplication of services. So what you would look at is a potential de-scope modification. It would have to result in some consideration, but it would be something negotiated on the current. But I think the general trend, if we go in that direction, would be to get all the inventory on the same page.
Okay, next question.
For the future of P260, do you foresee the current operating hours being expanded for increased availability?
Sean, want to comment on that? One of the folks, I don't know if we introduced him separately, Sean Walkie is actually in attendance from headquarters. Sean is the GTR for the P260 contract. So it's an ideal question for you, Sean.
We will probably leave the hours of availability as they are. We're trying to maximize the amount of time the system is available to all of the contractors. However, we do have to make sure that we've got enough time to allow for reconciliations and our different interfaces with other systems.
I do have a follow-on question, comment, just interchange. As far as the availability itself, are you existing contractors having accessibility issues as far as both the timing and or the number of staff you have PIV that need to access the system? Anybody want to comment?
It's gotten better lately. It's always harder at the beginning of contracts when you're signing your people up with new PIVs.
The comment was it's getting better as of recently. Is that the general consent?
I'm sorry, if I could just add, yes, I agree 100% that it's getting better, but I think that the current concern with the report cards coming out is the FSMs are being measured on the days to complete and actual days and not days that P260 is open. So for instance, if we're not doing something it's due on Sunday, that's reducing our scorecard for it.
Just so everyone can benefit, specifically what was brought up by Ms. Sparks was the fact that the drive now is HUD is undergoing a process of trying to roll out scorecards as far as both the existing FSMs 3.0 as well as eventually 3.5, 3.6. Both for the asset managers and field service managers. There is some concern regarding that logic. I would say we're going to table that discussion for separate. We recently received feedback both from the FSMs, AMs. We are actively looking at it to make sure that whatever the final scorecard once we go live, which would also be part of this solicitation, is both fair and is capturing the accurate data. That was the entire intent of putting it out before we went live, to make sure that you're not being unfairly punished for times that would not otherwise be either your own fault or negligence, or something that would be further limiting what the contract says.
Okay, we take one more.
Okay. Can a new business be found technically capable?
Yeah.
The specific, Louis Bogan's response to that was yes. To the extent, one of the things that we're looking heavily at as far as the factors go are specifically the past performance, past experience factor. While we're not prepared to unveil what the final structure will look like, be aware that there likely will be changes. I mean, there have been changes that have come out both in Court of Federal Claims, GAO, protest decisions most recently, and a lot of them came out in the 2012 timeframe, defining past experience as a responsibility type factor. So to the extent it hasn't gone as far as the FAR requirement for past performance, when you evaluate separately, obviously, no past performance is evaluated as a neutral. What that means from an evaluation standpoint is the factor basically gets pulled out and the remaining factors average, so it neither counts for nor against you. To the extent, that past experience or past performance are evaluated under the acquisition, we'll have to definitely take that into heavy consideration. The goal, I guess, going forward, both with 3.5, we want folks to have grown and learned the business prior to trying to cut their teeth for the first time on something as large as the M&M. Do we expect you to have everything? I think the answer is no. We don't expect you, you can be a new small business to the extent that hopefully that you have subcontracted and done some of the work, that you have familiarity, even if it's not for HUD. Our goal is to not shut the door and leave people out in the cold just because they haven't performed. We realize the commercial segment performs very similar services. The structure may be different, the fact that services are combined and whatnot, but we would like to be more inclusive along those lines rather than exclusive. So I think you absolutely will see changes with those factors.
Okay, let's move on back to Fort Worth.
Okay, Mr. Carnes, in a recent email with my company, you stated you have no objections to stressing the fact that SCA compliance will in fact be mandatory for the FSM requirements. The problem I see here is that if HUD stresses that compliance with the SCA wages and benefits requirement is mandatory, but there is no enforcement mechanism, then those who submit prices in their proposal that comply with SCA will be at a competitive disadvantage versus those who have no intention of complying with the SCA. How does HUD intend to verify that companies awarded FSM 3.8 contracts are in fact paying SCA wages to ensure everyone will have a level playing field?
Here are my thoughts on that specific topic. As you know, HUD does not control DOL, Department of Labor's SCA Service Contract Act wage determinations, nor do we cover or issue final guidance as far as whether the contract is actually covered or not. It's based on the type of work performed, and it's clear that field service management will always have covered categories under the SCA. To the extent that, the professional work under AM, we have been able to make the arguments the categories don't map up, that SCA would not apply to something like asset management. However, the preponderance of duties and the work actually being performed under FSM will always be subject to DOL's SCA prevailing wage determinations. To the extent that it encompasses multiple areas, I don't know how far down the path we'll go about including the prevailing wages in their entirety. What we would do is potentially include, the links, but specifically, I would, notify anybody serious about bidding, take the SCA drill very, very seriously, because I say that HUD has no control whether after the fact you get an award and you get pulled for audit. Specifically, they start seeing violations, they're going to pull literally everything you have. We've seen it before. We don't blame them. All they're trying to do is make sure that the employee actually performing the service is given the prevailing wage required, both under the SCA, the law, and as well as the contract. To the extent that you relied on a prevailing wage determination at price proposal that was later changed by the Department of Labor, it is sufficient grounds for a request for equitable adjustment. It's just a matter of submitting the necessary paperwork. But everyone should be, for the areas governed, should be planning and mapping their categories and planning to pay SCA wages.
Okay, one more, Brian.
Will you allow more pages in the technical proposal this go round?
Or less.
There will be a slight increase. I'm not going to say how many pages, but it will be a slight increase.
All right, one more.
Actually, can I add something to that? I will add something to that, not on the page count specifically, but the way the factors were written last time specifically. The technical approach factor, I know last go around required both a workflow chart and an accompanying narrative. Personally, from a CO standpoint, and I'll defer to any of the REO or our program folks, whether or not they like the way it worked. What we've been trying to do, and the reason we've been trying to keep the page count down, we're not looking for folks to regurgitate our PWS. We know it is big. We're not fooling anybody by saying it's not a large document. You will be held accountable if you receive an award for all of it. But the extent is trying to capture those items that give us a high degree of confidence that you will be able to successfully perform. The intent behind the workflow chart and the accompanying narrative specifically, one was to see your internal process steps to make sure you're capturing everything that's required, in the PWS without regurgitating the PWS specifically. So the reason we put those page caps on there was, we are constantly trying to boil this down to make sure we can readily weed out those who understand and don't understand the requirements or have taken the time to fully review and understand, HUD's process and how it is different than maybe the commercial segment even. But it's something that we are seriously discussing right now to make sure that the page counts to the extent are sufficient for what you need to submit. So that will come out as far as either the draft solicitation or when the solicitation goes live. You'll see specifically Section L instructions to offers will identify any of those page count limitations.
Okay, one more.
Okay, will HUD be using the totality approach in the grading of past experience this go around?
Yeah, it's one we can't answer at this time until the factor's finalized.
Okay, that's one we can't answer at this time until the factors are finalized. Okay, so I'm gonna go back around to each site again for last state. So we'll start with Atlanta.
Atlanta doesn't have any questions at this time.
No more questions, okay. Hey, headquarters?
Yes, you just mentioned a draft RFP. Will there be a draft RFP coming out before the actual solicitation?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on.
Our intent would be, to the extent there is not a draft RFP, there still would be a Q&A period defined in the actual RFP itself. So don't think just because it didn't go out in draft form before the fact that HUD is not willing to hear your concerns or make changes. Specifically, when a solicitation goes out, we always have the authority to issue amendments after the fact. Typically, we narrow it down to a 10-day period. We want to give you reasonable time to review whatever the requirements changes are as far as the solicitation, but there will be that Q&A period, and historically we would follow the same approach of amending the actual solicitation itself to include those Q&As for the benefit of everyone. We have folks submit them in writing, the questions, so that we can issue one typically fairly large volume of the Q&As to make sure that everybody is operating off the same assumptions.
Okay, next question, headquarters?
No more questions here.
Okay, headquarters rest. So back to Denver.
Yes, we have a couple more questions, both related to P260. Would you consider providing subcontractors more access to P260? i.e. expand the portal?
It's an excellent question. As those who have historical perspective know, originally we did have there were subcontractors who had access to P260. From both a program and a contract standpoint, it poses, because the amount of information we can limit in P260 is controlled by Yardi, and it's tough to lock down. Therefore, the subcontractors have access to I won't say, it's not top secret or secret, but it's definitely confidential and sensitive information within P260. HUD has no direct privity of contract with the subcontractors. We can hold the primes accountable for their subs, but not the subs directly accountable. That's the logic behind locking it down. It's not to make it tougher on any of the prime contractors. specifically what we would like you to do is make sure that you have all the folks that have the access they need, to get their PIV. And to the extent I know, some of you, it's been a long time getting the necessary resources you need, getting the PIVs and everything else. That's why earlier I did ask that specific question. Is it still, a problem getting the PIVs? It's something HUD is sensitive to, and we'll work with you on to make sure that you get the necessary access. It's not a gotcha that we're trying to hold you accountable. It's a matter of looking at it from, an objective standpoint and trying to protect the information and HUD overall in the event that data would be compromised. What I would say as a follow-up, we're also looking at mechanisms of streamlining. I mean, we hadn't dictated the YARDI, but to the extent we realize you use separate EMS systems to manage your daily operations, looking at items such as offering you the availability to reduce duplicate and redundant data to the extent it doesn't expose P260 to a data risk. I mean, I think it's safe to say HUD would support those efforts specifically. The formatting and everything still needs to be worked out, but it's something we have actively talked to YARDI about as far as your availability basically to do the mass data feeds so that you're not caught up constantly having to enter the data 2-3 separate times in separate systems. Also, I would encourage, to the extent you can, maximize the use of the portals, the separate that really, like the closing agent portals, there are separate portal capabilities. That's HUD's mechanism of locking down P260. It's scary how much I've learned about the system, being that I don't even access it. But from a contracting standpoint, definitely, allow access through the portals. That was the whole intent of the portals, to control the access those specific subcontractors have and need.
So, Craig, I think if I understand the question correctly, then the real gist of it is there any consideration to expanding the portal concept so that more functions maybe could be done by some subcontractors then?
We would need to know specifically what access they're requiring, what data they require access to, and the why. If it's not obvious, the why they need it. But I think we would absolutely be willing to consider that. That's something we could definitely lean on, YARDI and the P260 contract to possibly expand the access. It's not a matter of trying to keep contractors from getting the access they need to do their jobs. It's a matter of making sure we limit the access so that they only have what they need to do their jobs, so that we don't compromise the data integrity.
Okay, great, thanks. The other question is, would you consider, or have you considered allowing some sort of a computer sync process from a contractor's proprietary or the system they use to P260, some sort of a batch upload of information process?
That actually is something I just covered, so I anticipated the question even before it came in. But the answer is yes. We've actively been pursuing that and looking at expanding and opening up. We would have to, specify, because it likely would be a unidirectional or one-way feed as far as the data specifying the formatting. But to the extent that the EMS system could be modified to feed in that format, I'm wholeheartedly would support that. I'm all about efficiency. I don't like folks having to do the same thing more than once.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions in Denver.
Okay, so all the questions from Denver, so we'll take a few more from Fort Worth.
Okay, will you provide your conclusions about set-aside plans and or LPTA/best value plans before you release the solicitation?
I don't know that we can honestly give a definitive answer on that at this point. To the extent that we know several weeks in advance, I would encourage us to issue that as, an amendment, maybe even to this specific announcement, so that it's out there in FBO for the world. We would give that information all at once so that folks have access, so they can we realize what goes into it from a proposal standpoint, trying to work out those agreements between businesses, everything else. we don't want you to have to make those decisions last minute either, to the extent that we know up front and can give you the data. There's nothing sensitive or secret about it. We would want you to have it as well. It's just a matter of making sure the decision is final and it's in the best interest of HUD.
Okay. We just got time for one more, right?
Okay, in a joint venture arrangement, whose name should the line of credit be? The joint venture, 8A, or the larger firm?
I'll take the first stab at it. I will defer to my counterpart from SBA if he wants to certainly provide additional guidance or correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of the joint venture is that all parties named under the joint venture, the privity of contract extends beyond. So it becomes a question of typically one of the vendors, normally it's two vendors in a joint venture, takes the lead. Normally it's that vendor. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Okay, so that concludes the question and answers part. So Mr. Lewis will come back up and wrap this up for us.
Okay, again, I want to thank everybody in the field for participating and all those who had a hand in putting this event on. And again, I want to thank all the senior management from HUD for attending, and especially you guys for attending. We look forward to seeing a lot of proposals, but I must again stress the fact, please read the proposal, and it will cut down on a lot of questions that you have. So again, thank you guys, and this concludes Industry Day.
Thank you.